Just in time. Absolutely. Oh.
Hi, Cortland.
Yeah, how are you, Rick?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good. Cortland is gonna need to leave, is it? What? A little bit early?
Yeah, sometime around 5:15 to 5:30.
Gosh.
It looked like a short agenda, except for the work session, right? So. That's okay. If you Rick didn't think you would need legal counsel during the work session, Adam, so.
Yeah, where you guys aren't making any decisions or anything like that. What you're doing is just listening to the applicant and then he kind of gets a vibe of, concerns that you might have. And then he'll come back and on that one, you're more than welcome to.
So will the applicant come in to talk about the one in the work session?
He's the one that will be presenting.
Oh,
So
okay.
it'll be the applicant that will be talking to you about it. And then if you guys, they're like, maybe we need to have more work sessions, you're more than welcome to encourage him to have more, work sessions on that before we go to a public hearing. It's really up to you guys. So.
Okay.
Okay, well, our fearless leader was not gonna be here, and then he was gonna be here, but he's not. So, I'm sure the vice chair will get us going. Rick, do you take the lead in here?
You're totally, yeah, please.
We got some minutes, we're gonna approve. Anybody have questions or comments on the minutes? We good on the minutes? Commissioner Wapner is online, I think.
Somewhat.
Okay. First item is a conditional use permit for reuse pump station. I understand that this is up at below the bridges. It's for the purpose of collecting treated water out of the treatment plant that will be installed for Powder Mountain.
Yes.
And then that water will be pumped over to water the golf course. Okay. Anybody have any questions on this?
And the land's being donated from Bridges.
Pardon?
The land's being donated. I think there was
Yeah.
a relationship there.
And we did some checking because it's holding a lot of water and it's a small area. And the basin itself is actually 23 feet deep, and that seemed like a lot to me, but I talked to engineering and they're like, that's standard. It's usually between 22 feet, and then they put a fence around it, and then they line it with concrete going down in that area. So they put the fence around for protection purposes, but anyway.
Be good use of the sewer water, the treated water.
Yeah, it will be.
Well, engineering will have to approve their designs and everything, right?
Right, yeah.
So this is on the consent items, so we typically wouldn't have a lot of discussion on these two items.
Yeah.
And I understand that this treated water supposedly or guaranteed has no odor.
That's what they tell us.
Okay.
You can drink it.
It's supposed to be potable. I don't know if I would try that.
No, you can drink it.
Kids can swim in it.
Did confirm that. I think, this will be sprinkled onto the golf course, but the state has now made a regulation. You can't do that in the future for future projects, but it's grandfathered for this project.
That's what I understood.
Was there a reason they decided you couldn't sprinkle it on other projects?
I don't know. I never got the detail on that. I know that there was some discussion at one point, they were gonna try to look at using it for snowmaking, but, that's still, they never got approval for that.
It ran afoul of that new regulation.
Yeah.
Okay, and, the second item, request for approval of a conditional use permit for a public utility substation for a chlorination shed. Coal Canyon Water.
Yes, I'll be,
What,
yeah,
what do
so
we need to know about this?
let's put that report together, and this one, it came in, and being that it is in unincorporated Weaver County, and it's actually property that's owned by Weaver County Corporations in North Fork Park. And it's right behind the gate, that Nordic Center that you just got there. Yeah, and so they plan to build it right next to the road, and what it is there's like a giant storage tank up there that Coal Canyon Water Company owns. And then there's a water line that runs along the road, and so basically that tough shed, that 150 square foot tough shed is gonna be placed right by that water line. And they're gonna divert water, and they're actually gonna treat it, they're gonna filter it, and then they're gonna do some chlorination of that water, and then it will continue on down the line.
And that just serves as a private water company that serves houses in that area.
Seeing as it's a county-owned land and a park.
Yeah.
Can you, does it, I mean, do we have any say in what they put there? Meaning like, no, I guess my concern is that area gets a lot of snow. And if you just put one of those sheds from Home Depot there, it probably will be ratty in a matter of years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And where it's county-owned, publicly enjoyed. I think there might need to be, my opinion is it should be something a little more permanent looking. If that makes sense, whether it's metal siding or something that, block, something that's like gonna hold up to the winter and not look rough after about 2 winters.
Yeah.
Because it is a public area, right? It's a public, it's the equivalent of building a building in your park, should look reasonable after a couple of years, otherwise we'll all have to look at it every time we go to the park.
Yeah.
So.
This is the picture of it?
The pump.
That's the schematics.
There is a picture of the tough shed in.
The mechanism, we don't have a picture of it, I thought.
And then the outline of the shed.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like it's got a pitched shingle roof in this drawing.
Well, they specifically called out tough shed, which is just a pre-made wood
Right.
building, which I don't have any problem with for like personal home use and people's opinion. But now we're talking about, like, my concern is it's a park, it's a county-owned park.
Yeah,
We should probably make it a more permanent type structure, is my thought.
yeah, you guys can definitely.
Cause you look at, yeah, exactly. So everybody that comes to that park is gonna drive right past this, whether you're going into the park or staying at the outside. It should be something that's fairly permanent looking, whether it's block or something just that will hold up, cause I mean,
What material are we using, Felix?
So it says right here, concrete foundation. And it says exterior siding per owner selection as approved by Weaver County. A metal door, warning sign. So if you look at page S201 of the plans, S201. It has those details, metal soffit and fascia. Standing seam metal roof. And then flat panels per owner selection as approved by Weaver County. There's also some notes there on that same page. Says the contractor to provide pre-engineered and fabricated wood frame building to meet the design criteria specified in the project drawings.
yeah,
Do we know what the other buildings are up in that area?
the one,
flush toilet, bathrooms, neck brick. And
Yeah,
building, I'm on the board of directors for Ogden Nordic. I'm very familiar with the area, the building on the corner. is a building that was moved up where Ogden Nordic has their headquarters. Then, yeah, there's, you see off to the left there's a octagonal building. That's where Ogden Nordic is. They're putting, just inside the gate, they're putting a shed. If you look off to the right of that, there is a wooden shed. And then there's like a metal connex. The camp host parks is their fifth wheeler there, and they spend the summer there. But over to the side this year, there's approval and the county's gonna put a building in there. They've got funding for it. So that's what's up there now, and the county's gonna put a building in there in the future.
Can we make it match whatever that building's gonna look like?
We could, and we
Is
could
that a good
require-
idea?
Well, I would think it would be, or to at least tie in some type of wood material, so you don't get stuck with vinyl or metal.
Just whatever,
That other building, the new building they're putting in isn't as far enough along to where they have a design done that would be.
We could find
What will
out.
the new building be used for?
The new building will be, the intention is to get a contractor up there. Right now, they're looking at getting, either Wasatch flooring, or there was another outfit, I forget the name of it, to come up to rent, mountain bikes in the summer and to, as a concessionaire, and to rent, cross-country skis, snowshoes, and, fat tire bikes in the winter.
Would it replace the yurt?
The yurt we're gonna keep the yurt because the yurt is where Ogden Nordic is a nonprofit, where we have our headquarters. And out of there, we, have, PSI level certified ski instructors that teach children's lessons. So that building will stay.
You may wanna pull this from common consent and discuss this if you wanna make some changes, which is just fine.
So I do notice it's saying I'm putting some foundation. There's a tough shed, just sits on the blocks or something, doesn't it? The Home Depot, so this is more substantial structure than.
How many square feet is it, Felix?
150.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't require a building permit?
They'll still want to inspect the plumbing and electrical though.
my only 2 cents in bringing this up is it should match, I think it should match the more permanent structures. And I think if we're, because that's like, in my opinion, a very extremely nice park.
Oh, yeah.
That's not common. And we should try and have it be if they're gonna build a building up there, it should be something that will last a long time and not require a lot of maintenance and look just reasonable.
And I'm sure they want to as well. In fact, the parks department, they came to me, they're like, what are you making me go through a conditional use permit for? And I'm like, because you have to. It's like, it's required. We can't, you gotta do, you're the county, you gotta follow the rules. And so
Are they leasing the ground off the county?
I don't know on that.
No, there is I don't know the background, but there's an agreement specifically between the county and this water company that allows them to put that there. And I think there may have been some litigation, or at least, I don't know if it went to litigation, maybe it was threatened litigation, I don't know. But somehow they ended up negotiating, the county and this water company. And again, I wasn't involved, but they negotiated this agreement to allow them to put that facility there.
So looks aren't necessarily health, safety and welfare, but the general plan says that buildings are supposed to look like fit in with the building around, so that's probably the hook to use, it has to look like other buildings.
Yeah, you can use that as part of the conditional use permit.
That and it's also a county owned property. So I think there's some say there, right? There has to be. I mean, Felix mentioned multiple times that everything would have to be approved by the county. Because
Yeah.
it's the county-owned property. If it was a privately owned property, I think it's a totally different discussion. Like, we can't really tell them what they want to do, whereas private, it's park, like, hey, let's just make it, we're talking like. Going from a top shed or a wood frame to maybe block and then some metal roof that looks like the other ones that are up there that look nice.
And notice this is, this on putting the foundation,
Well, there's,
so it's not,
they have a, yeah, they have a putting a foundation.
so it's a little different than tough shed.
That was the description. It said top shed, and like I say, I just want it to match, be block, be something
That's in that area.
that's like that, so we don't have an outlier of it. When I see a top shed, it could be the little. It's,
Do you wanna put a caveat on it to match anything? What it should be is to coordinate with the county to match the new building that's gonna be put in there. Right. Because what's in there now, you sure shit don't wanna match what's in there right now.
that's my 2 cents.
Because it's a mixed bag of stuff.
Like I say, that's it.
Well, do you wanna pull it from common consent or, common consent, is that what it is?
It is.
Consent items, pull it and just, then we could add some. information.
Can you see it?
Can do that.
And then we're gonna have in the work session, we'll deal with that when we get there, right? Yep. And basically, the applicant is gonna present his ideas for what he wants to do.
If you guys have questions about it right now, I'd be glad to.
Yeah, I have a question. When you go through it, they said they gotta work with Eden Water to get water. Then they gotta work with Wolf Creek Water and Sewer, because they'll need a plant expansion to cover their sewer. I'm assuming that's fine, you can go ahead and rezone it, but you don't get a building permit to put anything there until those conditions are satisfied.
They don't even get subdivision approval before, they have to address those things.
Oh, all right.
Subdivision.
So we don't need to worry about that at this point.
Typically, we require a notice that they have noticed those companies of their intent. And that's all that's required at a rezone. There's not an actual required, serve or anything like that. That happens at subdivision level.
Has any of that discussion happened at this early juncture?
Right now, I know that Wolf Creek has some major issues, and so does the water. They're gonna have to if the water doesn't work out, they could possibly look at creating their own system up there. That they have to address all those things at subdivision level.
Did you go to taking water from Eden and putting it into Wolf Creek?
Well, it was with Eden Waterworks, they would be getting water from them, but from my understanding, there's issues that they have with that, not issuing any, will serve this time.
Yeah, they've suspended any new permits.
Right, there's a moratorium on that, so that's an issue, so they're gonna have to address that at the subdivision level. And that's, they got a lot of hurdles
Things work out.
to jump through. And I would say they're small hurdles, they're major hurdles that.
So besides that, what are the other major hurdles that you're aware of at this early time?
Well, I did have a concern, and we can talk about this with the applicant, but when you look at one of their documents, they leave a street off of the street regulating plan. And that was a big concern I had, is if you go to this, where is it? I gotta put on my glasses. And, we usually don't do much for work session items. Um. Oh, right here. The map that looks like this. That the applicant submitted, they left this line off, and if you go back in and look at chart, at the beginning of Charlie's report, it shows that line on there. And so that's
Or
something,
you just drew that line in.
I just drew that line in because I'm like, it's not being shown. And
So that
then,
could be part of their request to change the street regulating plan.
well, they haven't submitted that. They've just submitted a rezone. They haven't submitted a request to amend the street regulating
They could.
plan. They could, but they haven't submitted that, so that's something we want to chat with them about and just say, are you wanting to amend the street regulating plan, or are you just looking for a rezone? Because if you're looking for a rezone, you gotta, deal with that line. You
Would
can't
you-
just forget about it.
Would you recommend they do the two together, or?
I probably would, if, where this is so small, that they do that together, but,
Because didn't this come up sort of with the Eden Crossing thing where the two were,
they were together.
they were together, both
yeah.
were together?
Yeah, and I think it'd probably be best for the public to see them together, if that's their intent. I just wonder if that was a slip, they just forgot that, but, I don't know. But that's one thing I noticed, so. Other than that, they're following the street regulating plan that's being proposed. They're showing small lot residential where small lots being proposed. They're showing open space where open space is proposed. They're showing commercial where, commercial is, so. But we haven't looked at it in detail.
Do you have any concerns about how it leaves these, I thought I read in the general plan that when this happens, you're not supposed to leave properties on an island in the middle of, form-based zoning, right? Any concerns? These, I know, I live up here, I ride here. These are old houses here.
Yeah.
These developments come in, these people, that property's gonna be developed as well.
Yeah.
Any concerns about, those are newer houses, about leaving them on an island there?
If it was where they weren't annexed in, they're just part of the county, I'm probably okay with it.
Okay.
Ideally, we would like to see them, but if they don't want to participate, that's their choice. We wanted to make sure that you can see right here, we wanted to make sure that this road right up here was going along there, so it allowed them, if they ever chose to want to develop, that they have that possibility for connectivity to that. Not saying they would, but at some later date, they may. I can't speak for those people in there, but my gut feel is they probably aren't super happy about, this. I'm guessing when the public hearing comes, probably here.
I imagine the people that live here, these are newer houses. the
They
people
are.
Might not be real happy. I'm sure the people here down low with these old houses here are real happy because they're gonna make money when they tear down their houses and sell it for.
Well, there's some that are not, so.
On
They
this,
express that with Eden crossings.
on this map where it says village, is it right there in the pink? That's where the current grocery store is. Just in thinking about the whole area, how it might look in the future is, and I know the grocery store owns their land across the street.
Yeah.
To potentially move. Is there any conversation, or have there been any conversations with your department as to what might go in that area noted as village someday if the grocery store moves?
In the grocery store area, we have had conversation with them, but in that area, we haven't.
You mean in the new area?
I mean,
So if you, the pink is where it is now.
yeah, over.
This is where they
Yeah,
own land,
in that area, right in through there, we've had some discussion in that area.
but not where the current building is.
That building right there, we'll have to ask the applicant what they want, are seeing.
But that's not, or is it,
That is part of that.
oh, I'm sorry, I was pointing to the wrong thing, I was pointing.
This is the.
Yeah, I was pointing,
area.
I'm sorry, I meant to point to this.
Right, we have one more.
Oh, with the
Current
grocery,
grocery store.
the current grocery store?
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't heard
Okay.
anything on that.
One other question before we go.
Yeah,
I thought I heard one of the commissioners, I heard someone say that a roundabout there isn't a foregone conclusion because the cost of the roundabout. If you read this application, it assumes, they mentioned there's gonna be a roundabout there.
right now, that's what's proposed, is the roundabout. We haven't got that far down the road to say no roundabout or a four-way stop.
Okay,
That study still has to be done.
but the roundabout's gonna cost more than just.
Oh, yeah.
So is there any opportunity as these things get rezoned? Okay, this rezoning is gonna bring a lot more traffic to that intersection. So can you hook a caveat for a bond or something to say they have to put something forward to help with the cost of that roundabout?
I would recommend we do the same thing with Eden Crossing, that we.
There's an
put that
amount.
in a development agreement.
There's an
But
amount.
we really didn't do much different than what's required by code with Eden Crossing.
Well, they've got to participate in, you're right, with the subdivision, they're gonna be on the hook for a certain portion of it, but it ties their hands a bit more because it's off-site improvements from the subdivision. And this would actually be, possibly off-site. That little
Yes.
segment might,
So is Eden Crossing on the hook for a roundabout there?
No.
in Old Town?
no, we haven't talked about anything there, we just talked about in Newtown.
It would seem as though that rather than, the developers are making the money of rezoning this property and then putting the density in, all right? It would seem fair that they bear the portion of the cost, or a large portion of the cost for the roundabout, because they're the ones that are doing the development and making the money rather than have the taxpayers do it.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely within your purview as part of this to include that. Yep.
No, we had some discussions that with regard to that roundabout, that Nordic has an obligation to help with that to some extent.
On this one? Yeah. Yes, there was some discussion.
And that's in their development agreement.
Yep.
Okay, and the same with Eden Crossing.
The New Crossing definitely had something in their development agreement with this, and we could do the same.
So Eden Crossing has something in the development agreement to participate in the cost of the roundabout at Old Town.
That is correct.
Newtown.
Newtown.
Newtown, not Old Town.
Newtown, yeah, Newtown. I'm
And
sorry.
it's just the standard.
They're both pretty old.
Yeah, there's not any clause if that's what you're looking for. It's the same percentage based on the traffic study.
Well, we better get going to a meeting.
We're just gonna have the regular meeting in here, since it's. And then we'll do the breakout the work session, so we don't have to leave. Of course, sign on the door.
Even better.
Okay, welcome to the meeting on Valley Plain Commission, April 23, 2024. Let's start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ready to get outside. You will be on this side. Harris guys.
Yeah.
So I think there's a problem with that. I don't think Janet is able to connect properly. Is there a way to?
Okay, we have Commissioner Pottenbaum, Commissioner Burton, Commissioner Grumpy, Commissioner Barlow, Commissioner Human, and maybe with Commissioner Wapner online, Commissioner Johnson is excused.
She sent a question asking if there's another way she can connect because whatever she's been trying to do isn't working.
Well, we have five present, we could proceed.
Have her talk on the cell phone here. Just call her. Yeah, we can proceed and then I'll get her on.
Okay, we have minutes from March 26, 2024. I'm not aware that anybody has suggested any changes, therefore they would stand approved. Well, nobody's got any changes. Okay, and thank you for getting those minutes out. We have two consent items. Number one is 2.1 CUP 2024-01, request for approval of the conditional use permit for reuse pump station located 4350 north, 4450 east, Eden. Marta?
It's a consent.
It's consent. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, entertain a motion with regard to 2.1 consent item.
Motion to approve.
Have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
May I ask for clarification? Just so it's clear on the record, I think it's assumed that that would include being subject to all the conditions listed in the staff report and
In
based
a
on.
consent,
findings
do
of
we
the
need
staff
to
report.
list all those things? In the past, we've just approved a consent item as
Okay,
is.
so that is the understanding though, that it would encompass everything listed in the staff report, correct?
I can change my motion. Motion to approve, consent item 2.1 CUP 2024-1. Request for approval of conditional use permit for reuse pump station located at 4350 north, 4450 east, Eden, Utah. Subject to all of the recommendations, conditions, and findings in the staff report.
A second motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Hey,
Aye.
Would you oppose?
okay for you to put on speaker?
Okay,
Okay.
motion carries. Now, with regard to consent item number 2.2, conditional use permit for public utility substation for chlorination shed to treat the Cold Canyon water, it's in North Fork Park. We've had some discussion about pulling this from the consent and moving it over to something we can more fully address. I have a motion to do that.
Motion to move, pull out of consent.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we'll address this as now as a regular application. Okay, for a conditional use permit. Okay, Felix. Now you can explain to us what we're doing.
Yes, Commissioner. So tonight we have before you request for approval of a conditional use permit. In this case, the conditional use permit is for a public utility substation. This is really just an addition to existing facilities. And what they're looking to do is build a chlorination shed within 160 acre parcel that belongs to Weber County Corporation. And what they would like to do is with that shed is have it as a permanent structure. And there would be filtration and chlorination equipment within the structure that would be owned and operated by Coal Canyon Water Company. And this is done through an agreement between Weber County Corporation and the Coal Canyon Water Company. So the responsibility for construction, maintenance, safety, you name it, would be on the Coal Canyon Water Company. And the zoning in this area does list a public utility substation as a conditional use permit. And that does require approval from the planning commission. This structure, structure would be 150 square feet and would be built in coordination with Weaver County, the facilities maintenance, parks, I believe it's Parks and Recreation would have some input as well as on the design and placement, construction measures, access. And so there would be coordination between both parties for this structure. Let's see here, going to the conditional use. And so in this case, for conditional use permits, part of the, under the purview of the planning commission is to add additional conditions that could help mitigate any safety concerns. They could also, actually, they could add conditions that would help this proposal better align with the architectural and screening standards of the Ogden Valley area and also the county code. And there's also standards that could be applied related to parking, access, really design and site development. There's plenty of conditions that could be added to this. The county staff has conducted a review of this proposal and included some conditions of approval. 4 conditions, and I'll run through those. Staff's recommendation is for approval of this proposal. The first condition of approval is the public drinking water system requirements are satisfied. The site and structure and mechanical equipment shall be kept and maintained for safety and good visual appearance. Service vehicle parking is maintained and accessible year-round. And the last condition, thoroughfare parking is not permitted. And that concludes
What's
rundown.
What's thoroughfare?
Well, basically the drive through the area, the public access, the access way.
Does that mean you can't park adjacent to the structure?
It would be my recommendation that service vehicles park in a designated parking area away from the right of way, as to not cause any congestion or safety issues.
That does neck down, and you do have that gate with the tire rippers on one side.
So if they're gonna deliver some chemicals, they've got to park in the public parking area and.
Well, there's actually another parking area that's along the side. Let me show you here. So you can see let me zoom in here on this side. Okay, there it is. So that black rectangle is the location. My thought was having vehicles parked in this area. It's a nice wide open flat area and it's very close by the shed. In some rare circumstances where maybe there's a service vehicle that needs to park directly in front of the structure. That it is written into the agreement between Weaver County and Full Canyon that they would arrange traffic control measures in order to, direct traffic and that it won't cause a problem. So
How often do you anticipate having to service or maintain that location to be on site?
that I don't know. Yeah.
I noticed in some of these drawings, they talk about, I assume it's solid chlorine. That they
Well-
somehow mixed.
In the plans, it does mention it's a 12% chlorine mix from what I saw.
Sodium hypochlorite or something.
Yes, it says 12.5% free chlorine. NSF 60 certified. This might be This is talking to talking about the 55-gallon polyethylene sodium hydrochloride drum. And that'll be housed within. But it says 12.5% free chlorine.
So we're not talking about, first thing, we're not talking about chlorine gas, right?
No.
So we got a drum of the chemical and it's gotta be delivered there. And it's probably gonna be heavy and they're gonna need to park somewhere close to make this delivery.
In the winter, they are not, the only place they're gonna be able to park is outside those black gates. Okay, it's never plowed, and that's where all the ski school and everything gathers, right inside those gates, right? So, anything they bring up in the winter, they're gonna have to haul from outside those gates.
Or make arrangements to plow themselves if they need to.
Well, the problem, they're not gonna be able to. I mean, there's skiers, there's snowshoers, everyone, you can see where the cars are, right? It's like you're going into a ski resort, once you step up, right inside there. You know, winter access is on the other side of the gates. They're not gonna be able to come in and those gates don't open in the winter, they're snowed in.
Or what if they just kept them open? To the extent they need to.
It would be an impact to the users of the park now. If they were to do any plowing or anything inside those gates.
Yeah. We won't wanna do that from the county side of things.
I mean, I'd recommend that we put a condition that, you know, there's winter access is available, but there will be no, they're not permitted to plow inside those gates. If they come in with open that gate and come in with a plow truck, it's gonna screw up everything for Ogden Nordic and what we do there for cross-country skiing and snowshoeing.
It's supposed to be more pristine.
Yeah.
Can they do a pathway just from the one side over to the other side of the gate?
Mike,
Like
I
something
bet
that they
they
could
could.
shovel and cause it's just a
Yeah.
55-gallon barrel. It's not that-
Was the applicant given a staff report and did you hear back from him?
I haven't heard back from them. They were pretty eager to start construction on this. And so I think if we come back with conditions that we'd like to see, and they can implement those pretty quickly here, they're going to begin construction pretty quickly.
And if they stationed a good sized snow blower there, could they just, is it such that they could just, a path would not disrupt anything?
Oh, yeah, if they
Was
went,
a pad.
if they, for winter access, if they got a snow blower and they just went here, right? Then I'm telling you, okay, if they are getting deliveries once a month, right, or once every 2 weeks, okay, and it gets to be like January, okay, you could be up there for a long time.
So they would need to
Yourself have
maintain
get
it.
in.
They need to maintain it on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, they'll need to maintain, you know, a condition is that they maintain a path in the winter to access it that doesn't impact the current user.
Is that a good condition that we can put on this?
I don't know if I would, if they've seen the conditions and they've seen, you know, that we indicated that, how is it worded? That thoroughfare parking is not permitted and they haven't made any issues about it. Typically, if the applicant's seen the report, they usually get back with us. If they have any
But isn't that
concerns.
one of the, but the concern is not, so when, I mean, I guess that's a good point, that what you're saying is, they've already seen this and said that thoroughfare is not, like, not using that as a thoroughfare to park is not a problem by us, that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, so they probably realize they can park there and just carry it over to that area.
But have they considered the impact that you're gonna get a 55-gallon drum in the winter without interrupting the trails of these hikers?
Yeah, that I can't speak. to.
So
Or
that goes back to the question of, since I don't know that if you told me that thoroughfare parking was not allowed, I would go, okay. Like, I get it, yeah, nobody wants to park on that road,
Yeah.
but nobody's thinking about, well, winter, the gate's closed and there's piles of snow everywhere. So then I think that changes the conversation to, hey, maybe they haven't thought of, oh,
The
well.
way they'd have to get there in the winter.
You could,
So that would make, that's why I say, should we have the condition that, hey, you need to make sure that you're not disrupting the winter, like, you can do it, it's just, you gotta find a way to do it that doesn't disrupt their operations, and if you gotta deliver a
Yeah.
55-gallon
I think
drum.
that's totally fair, if you guys wanna put that in there. And
I'd feel good if there was a condition, because as it is right now, they could think that they get a key to that gate and they're gonna come up with a plow truck and just make their way through and do whatever they want.
yeah, I'm sure that they wouldn't allow, only certain people allow keys, but yeah, they might be thinking they are getting one.
They might, I don't know.
We could at least clarify winter access for sure.
Something like that, make provisions for adequate servicing winter and summer without disrupting summer or winter uses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if they, I mean, to me, I'd be, okay, well, I'm gonna build a walkway that goes around the gate and just a little concrete sidewalk and just plow it.
Yeah.
Or something, or even just a dirt one.
But the no thoroughfare parking doesn't really tell the story.
Yeah, it doesn't,
We
and
didn't.
if you told me, if I told you not to park, no thoroughfare parking, you just think, okay, I can't park there, but the winter, it's a totally different.
I went through this
Yeah.
last year.
Totally different.
Could have been a little bit interesting.
Okay. Good question, yeah.
And then, you
All
know,
right,
the building to look like it belongs there, maybe contingent upon the new building being built across the street, but I don't know if that's what time frame that seems to be involved, and haven't heard about that.
And the new building,
If they've got funding, I'm sure they've got plans, so they must have some idea.
I think so.
they have funding and and there's plans that have went out and got the bids for, and the funding's approved, and the building's gonna be somewhere over between where you see the word sheet and where you see the word water. But that building itself will have no drive-up winter access. It's almost like a walk-up lodge.
Just to create uniformity in the county.
Excuse me?
I think it's wise to still put that condition.
Oh, I think
just
it's
so that
wise
it
to
creates a
have something
uniformity
in
in
there.
the.
So they know they can't come up in the winter and disturb current users.
So my condition, I guess what would be that it matches the upcoming buildings. And that it is or it is a very, sturdy or well-built building that we don't, so it doesn't look like tough shed, right? The backyard shed that needs to be painted. That's what I picture. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I don't want it to look like that. I want it to look like, well, it's just a block building that really doesn't change much, doesn't need much.
So, the planning staff condition number 2 says maintained in good visual appearance. Maybe you'd add something like consistent with surrounding structures and uses. Take care of your concern.
But I'm still not sure that have anything in there that addresses the other concern. That, winter access. Any vehicular winter access is from outside the current gate. So that they know they're not bringing a vehicle in there in the winter.
So let's try this as a motion. Are we ready for a motion to pick up those two things?
Yeah, any further discussion on this? Okay. Ready for a motion?
So, motion to approve CUP 2024-02, request for approval of a conditional use permit for a public utility substation or a chlorination shed to treat a Coal Canyon water, to include planning conditions of approval. Number 1, public drinking water system requirements are satisfied. Number 2, the site structure, mechanical equipment shall be kept and maintained for safety and good visual appearance. and the development and construction of the new building be done in coordination with Weaver County to match the quality and appearance of the building Weaver County intends to build adjacent to this site. Number 3, service vehicle parking is maintained and accessible year-round and not to go beyond the gate that is closed in the winter. And number 4, thoroughfare parking is not permitted. And in the winter, any access required shall be maintained by the applicant, and that access shall originate on the outside of the gate and not disrupt any winter activities within the park. Recommendation also includes the following findings 1 and 2 with no changes.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
That's second the motion.
Okay, further discussion on this?
Did we get all of the changes? There was a couple.
We'll go back to the recording.
I'm supposed to restate the motion. Restate it, so like- Are we comfortable if I don't restate the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Welcome, Commissioner Walton.
Chair, may I be excused now, please?
Okay. Pardon?
May I be excused now, please?
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, council. Okay, public comment for items not on the agenda. Do you have any? Anybody online? No? Okay. Remarks from planning commissioners. Planning director report.
Don't have anything.
Easy. Legal counsel has departed, so we'll assume he has nothing to say.
Did they make, did the county make any, the county commission make any determinations on the CW voting rights thing that we talked about a couple weeks ago? Not that I'm aware.
All right, motion to adjourn, the regular meeting. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're now in a work session. Director,
So,
taking the lead.
Yeah, you bet.
Work session.
yep, so on the work session, you will just be giving your personal comments. There's nothing as far as a motion or anything that you'd be making as part of this. If you go to the memo, it's identified the area that the applicant is requesting for the rezone. And you can see that on the front page of the memo. The thing that you're gonna be looking at most is looking at the street regulating plan, seeing how it is complying with the street regulating plan and how it's not. Probably the biggest thing to do at this point is to have the applicant present what he would like to do, and then if you guys have questions for him, you can address those.
But yeah.
Hello. Thank you. Is it possible to connect to that screen?
Yeah.
Marta.
Let's leave that here.
So you're a Cowboy Partner, huh?
I am a cowboy. Yes, sir. Is the best thing to do to email it to you or can I,
Cowboy Partner, is that a group of people from the area? Is that an investing group? What is Cowboy Partner?
So Cowboy Partners is a company based in Salt Lake City. Multifamily residential developer primarily.
Okay.
Roots going back in Utah to the 50s and 60s.
You want to send me, give me your email and I can send you the Zoom link, or do you have the Zoom link?
I do have the same.
Okay. Yeah, you should be able to share on the.
So I'm assuming Cowboy Partners has acquired all these parcels then?
We are, yes, we have signed agreements. We're partnered with the,
Parcel
with the-
owners.
Yes, with the parcel owners, correct. So the, and which is.
Recording in progress.
I'll just get this added into, so here I am. But so, and that's a typical setup for us. Owners, come to us looking to contribute their land into the project and become partners with us. We are long-term holders. Typically, we are, not really considering a disposition of a community in any reasonable time frame. Our intent is for our grandchildren to be figuring out what to be doing with these communities at some point. We also do all of our own property management. Most of our communities are for rent, and in the fifties and sixties, the predecessor company, which was called Prouswood before we were renamed Cowboy Partners, they did a lot of for sale and condo communities around the valley in those early days of condominiums, but we are for rent developers now. Cowboy Properties is our sister company, and so we only manage what we develop, and we only develop what we manage. And so as we are building and as we're developing, that's kind of the mindset that we bring to it, is knowing that, you know, this is something that we're going to be owning and operating for decades. And so that creates a mindset about how we think to build, how we operate, and how we interact with the community, right? So, you know, we want to come in here and be good neighbors, right? You know, we wanted to have the opportunity here to talk a little bit about what, you know, broadly what the vision is here for the site, which will eventually come through into a site plan and design. After the work session here, we'll be doing a community meeting here in a few weeks at the Huntsville Library, so that we can talk a little bit more, expand a little bit on that vision there, and get some feedback and comments and questions. And, you know, I've been in this meeting as some of the prior rezones have happened, right? I understand some of the general feeling here. And so, you know, we are, you know, we're vertical developers, right? So at some point, we're going to be coming in and we're going to be utilizing the design criteria that is in the form-based zone to create homes. And, you know, that's what we do. That's our mission. So, but, you know, from, you know, let's see. Yes, I can start here. Let me see if I can make this full screen.
Form-based zone requires you to have TDRs, and to get the TDRs, do you have a plan already of where you're gonna get the TDRs from?
It's lower, it says full screen mode.
There we go, full screen mode.
Cause we can rezone it, but if you don't have
Sure.
TDRs, you can't do anything.
Right. Honestly, the best thing for us would be able to find, you know, someone who has TDRs in bulk, right? Whether that's a Whether that's one of the resorts that has a lot of land and might have density attached to that. Part of our plan here is workforce housing. That's a lot of what we do. So within multifamily housing, within residential development, we do all scale, all income. Everything from single family for rent to downtown towers, deeply affordable housing to market rate. And, for this particular community here, the intent is for, mostly single family for rent. With some single family attached, row home, maybe a few flats. A portion of the homes here will be workforce housing. Probably targeted towards 50 to 80% of the area median income. And, for employers, we expect that to be somewhat popular to people employing individuals in Ogden Valley and certainly the resorts, but that's broad, right? So what we recognize about the TDR market is that it's, as a concept, it's fairly new here. It's not new in the world necessarily, but there's not been a whole lot of transactions. And I think the value of those TDRs are not commonly understood. So one of the things that we've recognized and has even come out of comment with a couple of residents of Ogden Valley is that at some point, there needs to be some sort of marketplace or tool or even just listing that allows landowners and individuals who might have acreage in parts of the valleys that are meant to eventually have more open space or be dedicated to agricultural uses, who might be interested in selling those, to be able to list them somewhere or bring them into a place where landowners or developers who are in some of these receiving areas in these town centers can connect with them rather than having to, I don't want to call up every person that lives in Ogden Valley and bug them and about whether or not they're interested in selling 2 or 3 TDRs necessarily, but some of them might be interested and some of them might hate my guts.
How many TDRs do you need?
So we are, at full build out, we're expecting 170. So I believe that the language within the zoning allows for up to a 15% credit for affordable housing. So, as I read that, there might be 25 of those homes that don't necessarily need a TDR. We'd be doing likely more workforce housing than that. But that leaves us at about 145 that we would need.
So you need about 145 TDRs. So when you come through with a project like this, right? I mean, obviously, you have financial people that look at it and analyze the cost of all that. We've had discussions in here of what's the TDR worth, right? So I imagine as a part of this, if a TDR was $1 million, you wouldn't be bringing this to us, right? If a TDR was $1, you could care less, so it's somewhere in between. So what's your analysis put at the value of the TDR based on the project you're moving forward with?
Honestly, I don't have that value yet, but at some point there's a residual that gets to. And part of the reason I don't have that yet is because we have to understand what kind of density we can really get to. We need to get through this part of the process to really know. But one of the big drivers here is going to be impact fee costs, right? There is infrastructure that has to be done here, right? There, for us to have sewer service, the Wolf Creek Water and Sewer Improvement District will first have to get through all of the permitting and expansion that they've been talking about and planning, and then I'll have to agree to annex us into that district. We have a line that's currently being installed through our site. We know that eventually we'll have the capability for transmission, but right now there's not capacity.
Okay.
And that capacity is going to be expensive and we'll have to pay our share of the cost there. And that repeats for water, that repeats for a lot of the things that have to happen here. You know, a lot of times when we go into a project, we're forecasting the costs that we know very well, the construction costs and soft costs and these things that we do over and over in our projects and communities. And at some point that gets you to a residual, and that's the land value, right? In this case, that's gonna be the TDR value, is really kind of what we can bear.
Rick, on the workforce housing, what, the percentage, 80 to 90% or of the average or something, what's the, like the income limitations? I think there's an income limitation on
There
those.
is, I'd have to go back and look at that.
And the question is it of the valley or of Weaver County?
It's Weaver County. Yeah, we have to go off of. And I think the ordinance, does indicate that they can go up to 15%. Like you mentioned.
Can they, I think they can go up to all of it. They could do all of it. I think is what we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, they could, but
The minimum is,
they get a credit for the 15%. They can't, if they go above that, then they've got to have the TDRs for that.
I thought that we made it so that all workforce or low income housing was, you could put as many as you wanted, you didn't have to have any at all. I'm pretty sure that's what it was,
Okay.
cause I was shocked that I could put a dozen houses on my 1 acre and I could rent them out.
Yeah. I'd have
As
to
long
go
as
back
they
and
were
look,
within the income limitations.
see how the commission approved it.
Now,
So
if
do you-
incorporation takes place, then this new city would have its own requirement for low-income housing.
They
So,
So it wouldn't be handled by the lower valley, it would have to be in the new city. So then incorporation guarantees you have to have workforce, moderate, low-income housing in the valley.
There is a concern there that if it becomes incorporated, that there would have to be more low income housing built that isn't done now because it's spread across Weaver County.
So it would have its own requirement up there.
It would adjust the housing so you could, you might go from the average income of 70 or whatever to an average that's much higher, and then you could rent it much higher and put it maybe you wanted.
do you operate, workforce housing in any resort communities, Park City?
We do. We have a community in Kimball Junction right now, been there for about 10 years. It's units, I think it's 2-bedroom units, have a 3-year waiting list, over 1,000 names right now.
Do you do that directly or in conjunction with Dale or?
No, those are, there's no kind of specific employee kind of partner there. And that's always, sometimes that really comes down to how a thing is financed. If it's financed with tax credits, that you can't really have that strong of a relationship. If it's something that you're doing through other financial tools, you can have a more direct resident preference for, people who might be employed in a specific area. We also, we have a community in Heber. We are starting construction with, I should say, here, I'll share this one. In the next few weeks, we are starting construction on a workforce housing community that we're building with Promontory on the backside of Park City, just off Highway 40, and that's
Promontory's land?
yes, yeah. So they contributed the site, and they're our partners in the deal. And this is a rendering of.
But you haven't done that with the ski areas up there?
No, not specifically with the ski areas, right?
And Deer Valley's just on their own, right? And so we're doing their own up there. So is that in parallel or sort of like what you're doing there?
A little bit, a lot of times it'll be probably using the same tools. And it's, there is, if you're building workforce housing specifically for an employer, it tends to be more corporately financed and controlled. right? Because the federal government is who provides a lot of the subsidies that come in. And, once they've started to put federal dollars on it, then, fair housing laws and different things come into play and really kind of, you have to work through those marketing plans with HUD pretty closely. So, I'll show a little, just to go through, everyone probably understands here, I believe Charlie kind of shared some of these diagrams, kind of how our site sits within the street regulating plan. Again, primarily the small lot residential, some commercial near the intersection, and a green area that's coming across the acreage on the west there.
On that sign, I did have a question. Are you wanting to amend the street regulating plan? Because I noticed there's one street you left off. And that's this one.
Yeah,
It's coming down.
right,
Right in through there.
right. So
Are you, is that part of your request is to amend the street regulating plan?
That's-
a rezone?
I guess that's not part of the request right now. One of the things that we've pointed out about that particular street is that you have the canal that's right there. You have issues with flooding already with that, and our my reading of the site is that there's gonna have to be some berming that's gonna have to happen. We, of course, on our site here, we're gonna be dealing with stormwater and bringing that all on site, right? Keeping that there, but we want to make sure that drainage that's coming down through that canal is staying within its channel. And so, part of the discussion we want to have is, what does a connection there really look like? Is that a pedestrian connection? Is that a bikeway connection? Are we really looking to have a 60-foot wide road there that's then coming over a canal? And
Right now, it's showing a road that's going over the canal. So if we were to do a pedestrian connection or something different, we would need to.
Right.
An amendment there.
our, any site plan that we would have would essentially keep that open, right? There's nothing to connect to right now.
Right.
And that's my, I guess, reading of the street regulation plan is that you build out what's there and leave connection for when those projects might come up around you.
We just wouldn't want to, approve something that doesn't show that,
Okay.
it goes contrary to an approved plan.
Okay.
This is one comment I noticed.
Okay.
Just if we don't, then obviously we're not following our plan. and
Sure.
We have to follow our plan or either amend it.
Yeah, I suppose that slide is a specific proposed street regulating plan with the actual in the corner, so it is an actual change. That slide is.
Thank you. So you can see here we've kind of overlaid that quarter-mile radius within from the intersection there as it lays out within a site. So
Could you go back a minute?
Yep.
You really leave two properties on an island, you hook around them. You talk to those property owners? Do you try to procure that property or what's the relationship with them?
I spoke with one of the homeowners very early after we'd come to an agreement with Naylor Family Investments. They didn't have any interest in selling at the time, and I kind of understood that. One of the things that we recognize is that the residential market has changed quite a bit, right? And so what a homeowner might have in their home, right now, might be hard for them to replicate moving at the particular moment. So, you know, I've certainly understood that. The other home actually sold, or at least was listed within, I was never able to, you know, I was given their phone number. I tried calling and making contact, was never able to actually get through to a person, but it traded, or at least it was listed at some point on a quick sale. And, you know, we weren't able to get in on that either. One of the things that we understand here is, again, it doesn't behoove us to create enemies with the people that are gonna be neighboring our project for perhaps a long time, right? So that gonna require some sensitivity in the actual site design and how we, you know, what we plan for that particular area, how we screen it, and how we communicate to those people, both during the development and construction process, but during operation as well. We take a lot of pride in the way that we operate things and not, you know, being good operators. So, but, you know, it is, if we were able to bring those in, it would certainly simplify things quite a bit, just in terms of our site planning as well. There's, we wouldn't be opposed to that. Okay. And we spoke a little bit to the landowner to the north, you know, that would kind of complete that portion of the street regulating plan as well, and again, have communication with all of the abutting landowners on the east side as well, so we can coordinate, but we weren't able to come to an agreement on that land item.
Do you have a time frame on your, you know, horizon that you've laid out for all this?
Well, I mean, if you were to tell me tonight, hey, you know, no other thing needed, the rest of the process, you know, we love it, go forward. It would take 3 years before, you know, when in discussing the sewer and the length of that, but it'd be 3 years before I'd need to flush a toilet or turn on a faucet here. You know, we still have a year of design and permitting and finance, you know, a couple of years of construction as we're building out homes and projects, you know, the amenities or the community center, right? So it's a long-term development process for us, and that of course is only going to be lengthened by the fact that we need to get through an entitlement process, and then we're going to have to work through and make sure that we've sourced all of the service that we need and the infrastructure that we need. You know, we would look to try and time our construction in parallel with the construction of the sewer capacity, so that you know, our first units and residents and tenants were coming shortly after there was capacity there to serve them. So that's how we would look to pair those up.
So you mentioned the architectural standards and the form-based code, those work for you. What about the height restrictions in the form-based code? Does that work for you?
Absolutely. So everything here is intended to be two or 3 stories, but primarily 2, quite honestly. All of the homes, likely 2-story homes. You know, our broad vision here is a commercial village close to the intersection, the budding, the current Valley Market. If we can create some sort of connection, that would be fantastic, but we'll have commercial buildings and we'll bring in users. We'll build those buildings as we can find users there that we feel are a good fit and part of the village that we're trying to create there. And then we'll create a connection into a green space that we show that transitions from that commercial area over to the residential. And so we'd like to create kind of a pedestrian path that connects those commercial buildings and connects over the canal into that green space and provides that buffer. So the the yellow there, the residential, on the west side, you know, we're still up in the air and kind of what the best fit for that is, right? And we'd like to go through this process, talk a little bit to the community, be able to talk candidly with the residents that we're gonna be building next to there. You know, my initial thought is that those are probably, you know, larger homes, single family for rent, homes there, but a little larger parcel, a little larger home. To fit within the somewhat odd shape that we have there as well. On the east side, we'll have, to the north and east, single family for rent, smaller homes, 2 or 3 bedroom homes.
Market rate stuff.
Mostly market rate, right, yeah.
And do you do any market rate, single family rental homes in Park City or other resort?
No, we haven't yet, and it's a newer community type for Utah, you know, primarily done in southeastern states, Arizona, Colorado.
And what do you think about nightly rental? Do you engage, well, first question, do you engage in nightly rental in any of your properties anymore?
We currently own and operate 3,500 homes, in Utah. We've never done a single night.
Those 3,500 are rental homes?
Yes, all of them are rental. You know, we've thought about it in different instances and really haven't quite gotten our mind wrapped around it, how you do that when that's the other residents in the community, that's not what they're expecting, right? So how do you provide that benefit to one resident? You know, you have to do it at the beginning and everyone has to understand it, but it's not part of how we do things. And certainly for workforce housing, not allowed. So, that wouldn't be anything we'd be doing in that particular community. So we sign year-long leases. Every once in a while, we'll do a 6-month lease. Especially early as we're trying to stagger how those leases turn over. But generally, year leases is what we're looking for.
For your 170 units, how would you generally allocate them to these 3 parcels? 3,
Sure.
whatever we call it there.
So I think the thought is that the primary residential would be on the east side. I believe that side's between 9 and 10 acres. To the south is where we'd likely look to do the workforce housing. And that's gonna be a little bit denser, right? There might be, you know, I think in my mind, we're thinking probably 70 or 80 homes there that are dedicated to workforce housing.
The south of the east side.
Yeah, the south of the east side, correct. And basically along the canal, and coming to that bottom corner there. And you know, framing the south edge of that residential center is meant to be kind of a common green space. We'll have an amenity building there, a leasing center, lounge, pool. A lot of the community amenities will be within that residential center, and so we'll orient you know, the different residential homes and around that green. So we have a couple communities that we've done that have a village scale is really what we're thinking about here, right? So we have a couple communities that we've done that are some of our strongest communities where we do, you know, 2-story row home attached, front doors, you know, on the yards, on the sidewalk with tuck under parking in the back. And the building mass will frame surface parking in the back so that it's something that's not seen from the street, right? But allows us to turn the corner and have some flats, right? The corner units, there might be 2 or 3 stories connected by a breezeway where we can do a 1-bedroom flat or a 2-bedroom apartment. And it allows us to, you know, work at a village scale and create unit types that have different sizes and allow us to meet different incomes within that range of workforce housing. And so it's that, and that ends up being a little more dense, you know, that might be 20 units to an acre, whereas single family for rent is more like 10 10 units to an acre.
So the larger home is about 10 per acre.
Right, right.
I'm sorry, did I hear that tucked under parking, would parking be underground?
No, it's, when we say tuck under parking, it's generally on the first level, but loaded from the rear. Underneath the second level, which is typically bedrooms.
So in a project this dense, in an area that does have a consistent snowfall issue, how do you pre-plan for snow removal, snow storage, extra vehicles that will end up there? And all of that becomes, and I'm speaking, my reference point is having lived in multiple other ski resort towns.
Mhm.
Where, I'll tell you straight out, my first observation is generally the workforce housing or the moderated, managed income, whatever you want to call it, is generally not right in the center of traffic and
Mhm.
town. It's usually adjacent somewhere. Often, I guess, having to do with the value of land and value of how it's financed and how you have to, how you can't charge a, even a semi-premium rate for it. But anyway, putting it right there where there is no extra space, no extra parking anywhere. How would you mitigate all of those real world challenges?
Sure. And we're very sensitive to that because that becomes our problem if we create it, right? So, and we do, one of the values of having the property management in-house is all of the people that manage that end of the business are 2 or 3 doors down from my office, right? And we regularly review, starting with concept and going through design, how our site plan and our communities work from, how are we going to remove the snow? Where are we going to store it? Our maintenance offices and the trash removal process. We've having built in resort communities before, I'll tell you, we've learned in some cases, right? We do have a community right now where, we wish it had more parking. And, the setup of the ground as to where it was built and what we had to work with, didn't allow for enough snow storage, right? And, whereas the Park City, the Promontory project, is a bit of a reaction to that, right? That one is parked, over 1, maybe 1.25 per bedroom. Just making sure that we had more than enough parking spots, but then very specifically planning the surface parking there so that we had turnarounds and hammerheads for trash, for fire, ample snow storage areas. So I think the space that we have there, we have the area. I mean, we're looking at that south edge where the canal is. We want to be sensitive to the canal. We've already given some easement to the sewer and water line that's coming through there, right? So there's likely going to be a landscape buffer across that entire edge, right? So that becomes a place, where snow storage happens and where we're able to push. But we're not the developers to ever short on parking. We want to be sensitive to how parking is designed because it, has a big impact on how people view the community. But projects that aren't parked well don't lease well and they turn over. And that's the most expensive thing that can happen for me as an owner is someone leaving, and there's a lot of costs involved in that. So I want people to stay.
So my observation is, and I say this, the Eden Crossing development was just approved with a development plan or development agreement. And I think the county made a big mistake with that will come back to bite them in the future because the county codes are not written for the valley per se, they're written for the valley or the county floor where there's less snow and less issues like that. So the parking that's in the development agreement for Eden Crossing isn't sufficient, in my opinion. So what you just said is good to hear at this juncture, as long as you're able to carry that forward and recognize where your problems are going to be. Because there definitely will be
Sure.
problems.
We do parking counts, 2 to 3 times a year, go out at 3 or 4 in the morning when, typically those slots are at their fullest, just to keep regular counts to understand. And so, we have urban projects, we have suburban projects, we have rural projects, we have mountain community projects. And so that we feed off that information to help us understand how these residences will be used. But yeah, we're, code for parking doesn't typically mean very much for us. We kind of park to the point where we feel like we're comfortable. Lenders have a say in that as well, right? But, we're bringing in that kind of operational experience to help guide us in how we're planning this. One of the things, and we'll probably expand on this as we're talking a little bit to the community, is just thinking a little bit about, the flavor of what we might be looking to do, right? I think we would like the commercial area to be thought of as an amenity to the wider community in general, but certainly to our residents as well, right? We want those places to be, and those uses and the businesses that come in to be something that they're excited about and are kind of additive to how they see the neighborhood and the village center there, right? So we want to be able to find users that we're excited about there, whether that's a restaurant or a destination restaurant that we can bring in here, or, some sort of retail that we might be able to, that kind of connects with, what is needed here in the community. Typically what we're showing here is 1-level type of buildings, and that would be quite fine if there were 2-level and there were offices above. I suppose you could do residences above. That's not kind of where we're at right now. I think we'd like the commercial village to be a commercial village. So, to the point that there's demand for office space or some sort of services that might be on a 2nd level that don't need to be on a ground level, I think we'd consider that. But primarily what we're going to be looking for is compelling businesses. In some ways, the commercial here is a bit of an amenity. So that's, we're not necessarily looking to spec things. We want to find the right user and then build the right building there for them. So that's, but certainly we want to, create a feel there that makes that a place that people want to visit, including our residents.
You calculated the volume of water needed and where the water's gonna come from for this?
Well, I mean, that is it's a big question. I think in terms of source, and I'm not a hydrologist. We have spoken with the hydrologist. We have the civil on board. We're in the Eden Water Works service area, but Eden Water Works has declared a moratorium right now as they study whether or not they have
They have some
capacity.
Yeah.
So, so that's one of the things that we're gonna have to figure out. And, if we can't find service from Eden Water Works, and if there's not source that is either available through them or that we can bring to them, then we're gonna have to look at other options. And that's something that we understand. I think we wrote that in the narrative. That's part of our problems to figure out. And so, when we talk about timeframes, right now, when I'm asked that question, usually it's fairly straightforward, right? I have a pretty good understanding of how long it takes us to design and permit and construct a project. But, quite honestly, our critical path right now is sewer capacity and finding the water.
We've sat through several of these studies with the water that they've done, and ultimately what they determined is that there's more than enough water in the valley for everybody and everything.
Well, I guess the issue I have with that is, there's a lot of people in the valley that have wells, okay, that are only so deep, right? And so if you put in these new developments, and these new developments start pumping out groundwater that's deeper than there, you see what's happening in Arizona, right?
Well, so that, I don't disagree with you, however, that's like generally what you're gonna find is that the studies and everybody puts out is just. Guess we'll deal with it when it comes up.
It's frustrating with River Basin Water and trying to work with them and then water providers and when studies say that it's there.
Cause yeah, right now, Weaver Basin will give you all you want,
Out of Pine.
just out of their water, you know? But so you find a straw, punch it wherever you want, they'll sell it to you.
Maybe back to the TDR issue, because I think that everything here revolves around the general plan and when you go out into the community and seek feedback, and it's probably gonna be all over the board, probably. The issue of TDRs is going to transferring density from view corridors and things like that is going to be critical. One thing you mentioned, and Rick, you can correct me if I'm not stating this correctly, but I don't believe you can acquire development rights from the resorts, Powder Mountain, Snow Basin, who hold the most, because those are not in sending zones. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can't transfer from the resort areas down to the valley floor.
So,
I think we need to confirm that.
It is confirmed. There's a valley height that they can only go from down to that area, but you can't take anything from the resorts down to the valley floor.
But like Nordic, you can, right?
If
And
there's
any of
areas
these other
above
on the
that
floor.
height, if there's segments in there that are within the height threshold, then yes, they could, but I don't think there's very much that is.
Which also begs the question, so like, so who's this, so like, I had this thought when he was talking, so Snow Basin owns a whole bunch of ground in the valley floor.
Easily transfer that.
But they could also can they transfer from their upper to lower, or how are we
They could
documenting?
transfer from the lower to the upper, but they couldn't transfer from Snow Basin or from Powder Mountain down to the valley floor.
Didn't this come about when somebody talked about transferring from up South Fork Canyon?
That was for an ADU though,
There was an ADU and then that's when we changed it.
but we
put
changed
a
just for the
stop to
ADUs.
it. And that made a stop for anything with resorts because it's above a certain elevation, all the resorts. There might be some segments in Nordic that are below that, but everything else.
That was Sourdough, or no,
Yeah,
somebody up in Sourdough.
that was the ADU transfer, but like the resort. I mean, they probably would be the easiest because they pretty much have open density
Yeah, and
units
that would
at
go
their
against the
places.
general plan too, because it was never intended that there was anything that was gonna be transferred from the resorts down to the valley floor.
so in your, equation, if you can just give us a range, what you think. And because it hasn't happened, obviously, no one can hold you to the range, but the value of a TDR is sort of going to be a magic number, once it comes to be. You've dealt with this in other places, you know what they've transacted for in other places. Do you have a range that you believe that you'll start to see happen?
Well, and I think that, to be honest, the very first range that I heard when I first started getting involved and hearing about TDRs and some of this might have been based by the couple transactions that happened, that, those values might be between $5,000 and $10,000 for TDR.
For a 3 acre piece of land TDR, so not per acre, but.
Yeah, just for a TDR that might allow me to, build a residential unit, right? You know, when you're buying land in other areas of Utah, whether you're downtown Salt Lake or Salt Lake Valley or Utah Valley, a lot of times the cost of the ground is expressed in the cost per door, right? The cost per unit. And that land cost can be anywhere from $20,000 to $75,000 per door, depending on type of project that you might be building. And you can generally expect to pay another $10,000 in impact fees on that, right? So, but general market rate housing and even affordable housing is maybe around 35 these days. And then add another 10, so $45,000 that you're dedicating to buying the ground and paying the fees that it requires to get service to that ground. The rent structures that might have, Weber County is, HUD develops the area median incomes for Weber County as a whole. So the rent structures in Ogden are the same as the rent structures in Ogden Valley. And the market rates probably aren't that much dissimilar either, right? So, so that range probably is about right when you think of, the impact fees for Ogden Valley, if you're in an area where you have to add service, are going to be astronomical compared to $10,000, right? It could be 3 to 4 times that by the time you paid for water and sewer and water shares and the various things that go into that. So, so you're having to make room within that kind of general $45,000 budget that might go to ground somewhere else. You've got to make room for the impact fees in there and try and get your land cost in there, and then whatever's left over is really what that TDR might be worth. To be able to do it on a
Right.
Now, if it's for sale or you're doing different things, that that could be there's different things that might drive that, right? So sometimes those things depend a little bit on situation and context too, but just speaking generally, that's kind of what would be my original thought. But it's
So just to complete that thought, Rick, just as of the last time we talked, there still have been no open market TDR transactions other than between related parties, meaning from one development to another, owned by the same developer or developer group.
The only ones that have occurred is for, when you're dealing with an ADU.
Yeah.
But,
Not in a
as far
development
as-
sense.
yeah, we've only rezoned a few areas that where it could happen. And it's not far enough along
Right.
to go and make it, to see the fruits.
Right.
If it's gonna be used.
And there have though been at least one or maybe more than one easement transaction, conservation easement transaction where money went to pay for that.
Yeah.
So those are, and that was, when I'm going by my recollection of what I heard, around $30,000 for a 3-acre piece, or about $10,000 an acre, I guess is the number I heard that went into buying the easement or paying for the easement.
Yeah, we haven't been tracking the cost of them, we've just been tracking the actual deed.
Right.
Recording it. So we can't speak to that.
That's the number I recall. It was around $10,000 an acre for the easement.
So, Chris, besides rezone, what are your big obstacles that you're looking at?
It's infrastructure, right? So, and for us, we, there's a lot of cost that eventually goes into the pre-construction, pre-development of these kinds of communities, right? And our our order here is that, okay, understand, can we do it here, right? And then we need to start spending money on, how do we bring the service here? What are our impact fee costs gonna be to have our, sewer, service, annexed into the district? What's it gonna cost us to find water, to get water, to get added into a service area, or we have to have some of those conversations, but we need to, we want to start knocking down the things that might prevent us from being successful in what we're trying to do here. So that we can move on to the next thing and we try to do as much of it as we can in parallel, but you really want to tackle the things that are fatal to the project first before you, certainly before you go spend $1 million on design, right? So, water seems like it might be the one, and TDRs certainly, right? We at some point you need to start having a line or having some confidence that you can bring together those TDRs. And I would say, I think there are individuals that are interested in getting into that marketplace, but it's just, I think it's really difficult, especially just for, the average landowner who may have something and there's just.
Not realize what it
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to know. And especially when you're feeling like you're negotiating against someone who's, this is their business and, they're sophisticated in some ways. Finding someone who might have a large number of them might only be preferable because, they might have a level of sophistication or land might be part of their business and, they're not feeling like they're at a disadvantage in talking with us about what these things are worth. And, at some level, an appraiser is probably going to come in and try and appraise what these things are going to be worth, and they're likely going to have to go look at other places in the country that are doing this, and understanding how it fits relative to those particular places and their housing market and how that might translate here. And I don't know what those places are right now, but I think that's something that we'll probably have to find at some point, because even if we're having conversations with smaller landowners that might, have 2 or 3, it at least allows us to communicate and say, well, here's what our rationale is based on. And, perhaps that kind of gives them some confidence or makes sense, but.
Sounds like an emerging commodity at this point.
Right.
So if a TDR value ended up being somewhere in the $30,000 range plus or minus, would that still be a workable number for what you envision?
It kind of depends. I mean, it would certainly make market rate housing more difficult, right? And you end up with, you end up having to, you can see how that could end up being more, perhaps large luxury homes, right? There are Summit County and Park City, they use ERUs, right? Equivalent residential units, and a different size unit type has different ERU equivalents, right? Just a studio might be 0.33 and another thing might be 2, but here they're all just 1. The workforce housing relies in everything it does on subsidy, right? At its core, you're creating something that is designed to lose money. So that happens by bringing in particular kinds of finance that subsidizes project costs. So, in a strange way, the expense of providing infrastructure or the expense of providing TDR become project costs that are qualified to be part of basis for tax credits that might be related to workforce housing. And certainly those might be tools that we would use to address that kind of cost.
So I had just this dawned on me a question on workforce housing. So, Would you envision now the applicant or the person to live in that house actually having to work in the valley? Or could they work in an equivalent infrastructure type job in Ogden, but just want to live in the valley?
The way that, HUD sees it, which is the way that I have to see it, is, if you are using tax credits, the project has to be for general public use. And so there are certain protected groups that are veterans, disabled persons, right? So there are set asides that you can give a preference to. Or if it's a federal or state policy, HUD will allow some of those things and still deem it for general public use. There are methods that you can use to give a head start to residents who might be employed in a certain area. It can't be if you're using tax credits, it can't be a legal document that's binding, but you can identify a geographic area and open up applications early to that particular place.
So you'll find a lot of people say currently live in Ogden, but maybe work in the valley or proximate to the valley.
Mhm.
And they'd like to live closer to where they work. Would you be able to give that type of a person who doesn't have a geographic location in the valley today because they can't afford it or because it doesn't exist? Would you be able to give them preference?
I think, again, in a project that doesn't have tax credits, you can set up resident preferences in specific ways.
Purpose and HUD don't always go together.
Yeah. So, if, I know that, I just spoke with the head of housing and economic development for Summit County, last week. And they just completed a study of the affordable housing that they have in the county, because they're very mindful and whenever they can, they try and put that, some sort of resident preference in place that, might create a waterfall that, employee that works in a certain area, especially if it's something that they've put upon a developer of a for sale residential community that might have golf courses or things like that, they want employees that work within that development to have preference, right? After that, it's kind of a public safety officer, a teacher, a firefighter who might work for the county next. And then after that, people who might work in various areas of the county, that's who they want to have preference. And sometimes they're successful with creating that. Sometimes we have to find a way to parse it so we're meeting the spirit of that, especially if there's tax credits involved. And that's kind of where you have to go, is you can, I believe that you can set up a process where you can give notice to employers within that geographic area, right? We're in this town center right now. It makes a lot of sense for my residential manager to know the HR person or the owner of every business in that area and put out an email communication when we have a unit come available. But and I should say the results of the Summit County study was that 80 to 90% of the residents of their workforce housing were employed in Summit County. And a healthy portion of the remainder were disabled persons. And anytime you have a resident preference around employment, you're going to have to include some language that speaks to disabled persons as a protected class who aren't able to work because of their disability. But so we do think that regardless of how we set that up, that the majority of people in that workforce housing would be employed in the area here. That would certainly be our hope.
One last quick question. Since you're geographically co-located with the Eden Crossing, are you working in conjunction at all? Or are you fairly operating independently, or?
Well, they're two different projects, but we talk to them quite a bit, right? we cooperated with them to provide an easement for, the sewer line and the water line to come through. So, we certainly kept track of, how they were envisioning their land uses coming together, and we'll be mindful of that as we're designing out how we're building our homes and our residences. But, I think in general, we want to have a pretty healthy dialogue with all of the landowners, especially abutting us, so that we're doing things. And that's even high, this project is unique in and of itself, in that we're creating streets that are intended to become public ways, right? So we are creating connections between our projects.
Sure.
That then will get dedicated over in some way. So we need to have that kind of interaction.
Okay, good.
So what are you looking long-term to potentially be a partner up here in the valley? What do you think about the incorporation effort that's underway?
I think either, we always want to be good partners with whatever jurisdiction that we're in some ways. There's an appeal to it, right? Because that jurisdiction gets closer to the place where where our residents live and where we do business, right? So, I think we're kind of agnostic as to how that goes. I think one thing we understand is, right now, we're starting a project, we have a site now in Mill Creek City, right, which just became incorporated 6 or 7 years ago, right? And I think what we recognize is there's always, there's this process that happens when a place becomes incorporated and some uncertainty. And, we would like to be able to we've got enough uncertainty in this project already, right? So I think our hope is to be able to start knocking down some of these things and be working on getting our project ready to go. As Ogden Valley City, or as the new entity is becoming incorporated and becoming, understanding how they're going to work, and so we can be eventually good partners with them. But certainly, we tend to be pretty popular with city leaders, quite honestly, because we do our projects in a specific way. I mean, you talked a little bit about your experience with affordable housing. We try to do our workforce housing, and we do a lot of mixed income housing, but we mix market rate with affordable units, and we like it when people can't tell the difference between our Class A market rate and our affordable housing, and that would be the intent. And we're fairly heavy-handed operators too, right? We've got rule books that are,
Well, it takes that,
stringent.
unless, if you want that to be your objective.
Right.
So my last question is, with everything that's out there in front of you, some things you don't know right now for sure. What's your percentage guess that this is actually going to come to fruition? I know you need to be optimistic,
Sure,
of course, but there are things you don't know, you don't control.
Sure.
So what's your percentage guess right now that it's going to happen?
That's hard. I mean, so we do hard things, right? And we have a long-term mindset, right? So we have partners in this deal that, at some point they'll get tired or we'll get tired, and that can always happen. But you hit it on the head. I'm going to be optimistic, right? And that's because we've got a pretty strong will. We know how to make things happen. We know how to create alignment. We're not a kind of shove it through kind of developer, and that's not really what's going to work here anyway, right? There's a lot of cooperation that's going to have to happen for us to find willing buyers of TDRs and people to participate with us for water, for sewer, all those things. And we excel at that, right? And affordable housing is a particular magic that requires a lot of different tools and a lot of different sources of financing and a lot of relationships of people, because there's not very much of that type of money available. And so you have to have the trust of the people, get that out. And that's what we do. So, you know, I have a high level of certainty, and I want to say I'm 80% positive that we can get this done. Now, you're telling me, you know, how for sure are you that you're gonna have a residence release open in 3.5 years? You know, like, well, I don't know, to ask me in a couple months, right, as we've had a little more time to work on some of these other items, and as we see how this process unfolds here. But, you know, there's a lot of the job of development is, and especially when you're ground up development and the end product is a building that's operating and is used and loved by its residents. It starts out, it's very ambiguous and murky, and the whole job is to remove ambiguity and to remove that murkiness. And my hope is that as we're working with the community, that we can apply that same kind of process, right? I think if we can, you know, if people can start to get through the ambiguity and see what we're doing and how we're doing it, that, you know, like, I hope, and no one's gonna carry me out of the room on their shoulders, but I think hopefully people will come to see generally that this project is good for Eden, it's good for Ogden, the way that we're doing it is the right way to do it. That's my hope, but it'll take us time to get there.
When's the meeting you talked about?
So we're gonna be putting a notice in the Ogden Valley News. I believe we have a reservation at the Huntsville Library on May 14th, Tuesday, May 14th, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
My suggestion is you think potentially, if you think it's going to be well attended, I don't know if you'll be able to tell that or not. My guess is it will be. That's a terrible venue.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Okay.
Right, Rick?
It's not the greatest.
It's small, the sound is bad. There's not much good about it. If you have more people, then we'll fill up the seats in one of the two rooms. So
Okay.
keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Because when people come to a meeting like that, as this group has had a meeting there and they can't hear, or they can't see, or they can't sit down, they get upset, not at whatever is being said, just
Right,
the fact that
just
the
the
venue is
situation.
terrible.
Okay.
So I would keep that in mind. If you think it's going to fill up more seats than
Okay.
than exist in that room, would you disagree with that?
Well,
I'd probably go to the
I mean,
elementary.
that
or
time of
the-
year, you can almost have it outside one of the galleries at Huntsville Park.
I think I'd go to the elementary or the junior high if it were me.
Elementary's always been good.
Junior high was
good too.
Just because there's enough room and you
So
don't have
last-
to risk.
Last question for me, because I just thought of something. And I'm out of touch with the school system here now, but, so the development you mentioned, to me, it seems like you're gonna be attracting kids, families with younger kids probably. Any idea what the school capacity, there's 2 schools here in the valley, and when my son was there, neither were at capacity. I don't know, they maybe have decreased in capacity since then. I had no idea. But is that an issue that you've,
Yeah, I think it's a good
anybody's
point.
talked to you about?
Yeah, no, we should open up a conversation. I'll say, you know, right now, we've got the Promontory project that's starting most immediately. At the end of the summer, we're starting a family-oriented, affordable housing community in Salt Lake. You know, it's 2, 3, and 4 bedroom homes. Their average unit size is 1,100 square feet. And that, you know, that type of housing is so desperately needed there, and we're conquering heroes to the school districts there, right? Because they're having to close schools right now because they don't have enough students. So that's our experience more often, but it's a conversation.
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah.
So some of this has been mentioned, the incorporation effort has been talked about. And there's been, you know, you mentioned that you want to be good neighbors and you want to, you know, where you're going to own and manage. I think that bodes well as a developer because it's your problem, right? I mean, that's a good argument. The question becomes, if there's a chance that incorporation is going to happen, are we what are your thoughts on whether we should be rezoning now or waiting until we know if there's a different governing body to look at this?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think I go back to what I said. Right now, we have to get to a place where we can start to figure out what needs to happen. You know, I was kind of asked a question about incorporation. I think, and you'll understand this. At some point, you know, an incorporated city has the burden of governing and leading, right? And as an incorporated entity, they're gonna have the burden of providing moderate income housing and all of the various things that get foisted upon them by the state legislature as well. And, you know, we know that we're part of the solution to that. You know, the things that we're proposing here are part of a healthy housing model. The families that you're describing are probably the children of the people who are living here now and who may not necessarily like the project to begin with, but understand that it's a time of life kind of thing, right? It becomes a way for someone to stay close to home and have entree into the next part of that community. So I think the fear in waiting is, you know, I don't know how long, you know, that ambiguity becomes much further out.
Now, wouldn't that, I mean, November would be the time we would know before November, actually, because
Sure.
we know whether or not it'd be on the ballot.
I think the policy, or just the ambiguity is how long, you know, I mean, incorporation is one step, right? But then, the process of becoming a corporation and setting up the ordinances.
The new government wouldn't be in place on, I don't believe until early part of 26, based on what I saw. Is that right, Rick?
It's gonna be about 3 years.
It's inevitable, but whether it's now or later, still to be determined.
So, you know, I think from a timing perspective, there are things that we need to figure out but it starts here with, all right, we want to understand that there is a project that can be done here, that it has support within the current jurisdiction and the general plan that was done in the area. And then we can start to move through the next issues, which are big ones, right? You know, the infrastructure and the TDRs are, everything else can be solved, right? We've designed a lot of communities and we financed a lot of communities and we operate a lot. But there's some really unique aspects to this particular site that need time and money.
Back to my original question, we got 10 units per acre on the west side. How many units per acre on the east? Guess.
Yeah, you know, and there may be less than 10 units per acre on the west side. On the east side, I think it would likely average out more towards about 15, right? So on the east side of so I'm looking at the east side here, right? So there'll be some denser row homes, and homes along the south. And then some smaller single family for rents, around the east and north portion of that east side. And that's probably more 15 units per acre, I would assume, if we're going to get to 170. Whereas the west side is likely less dense, you know, just by virtue of how it's shaped and, you know, what we'll want to do to respect the existing homeowners. There's likely not gonna be very many homes on that side of
They're
it.
gonna put some of these in the village area.
So the village area you know, I think that will be just commercial. We're just thinking of that as commercial right now. So,
As residential, or I'm sorry, commercial has no.
Well, it could have
Yeah.
second floor residential.
He said they don't want to do any of that.
so, you know, I think, and I don't know if a residential use is allowed in the commercial. So, you know, you could imagine 2 or 3 story, you know, old school Main Street type of buildings, right? Where there was a retail use on the bottom floor and an office use on the second floor and a residential use on the third floor. But right now we haven't in our minds programmed any housing for that particular, that's a commercial area right now.
Commercial spaces are premium G right now. There's not much available right now, so it's above us.
Okay, so we'd have probably 132 units on the east side. and 38, something like that on the west side.
Yeah, and even 38 sounds too high, so, right now, the blocking for it has been very general, right? We didn't want to go in with too much of a preconceived notion. So, thinking about the west side, I would, in my mind, there may only be 20 there on the area that you see in yellow. And, the east side and, we really want to kind of concentrate that residential community around that residential center. Over there. So, that's where we have, space for better site planning.
And as you drive up these streets on the west side, we're gonna see more just small homes on small lots. Are we gonna see a lot of second stories over there
On the east side or on the west side?
on the west side?
So I would, if you were to look at the streetscapes that, are, that are mandated by the code, I think have 55 to 60-foot right of ways, right? And within that is the park strips and the sidewalks and so forth. And we really want these to be village streets. We want to minimize the asphalt that we have and the roads that are coming through here. Because we want people to slow down. So we'll have travel lanes. They'll likely be a little skinnier. We'll have parking, that provides a buffer. We'll have a healthy park strip. We'll have a healthy sidewalk. And the single family for rent homes are generally, a little bit smaller, right? They're a little more narrow. They have side yards, some rear yards. They have garages in the back. You can see.
We're looking at that bottom picture there in the center. The fall trees. Is that what we'd expect on the west side? Something
Yeah,
like that?
that's on the west side, I would assume actually the lots on the west side would be larger. And the homes are probably gonna be larger as well. I think, we recognize that there's probably a market within the valley of people who might be here and building. But have 2 years of building a custom home and still want to live in the valley and, there might be some homes to respond to that particular market. So I would say on the east side, you're likely to get, more of that kind of village, village feel where you've got homes that are a little closer together and on the street and on a smaller street. With, easy access to the green space and the open space that we're creating there. Whereas the west side is a little bit larger lots, yards and larger homes. Because I think that's probably what's gonna fit best on the west side.
And the subsidized housing you're talking about, they still call it Section 8 housing?
No, there is Section 8 vouchers, but that's a separate program that's typically gone through housing authorities. So the workforce housing, essentially it has rents that are governed by the income restrictions that HUD puts out, right? So I basically have a limit on the rent that I can charge for those units, and the resident that goes into that unit has to qualify with their income, right? So they can't make over a certain amount in order to qualify for that. But Section 8 has largely, gone out of, that the program and the vouchers there is more related to public housing. And I think they still exist, but they're not a component of what we do.
So where do the tax credits come in?
So the tax,
Sorry, with the incorporation, if you get approved while we're Weber County and the rents are based off of a proportion of the income of Weber County versus if we incorporate, does that change then, or are you held to what you were approved under?
it's the same. HUD calculates those by county. So all of the communities within that county, fall under that rent restriction. Right, yeah, regardless of what the jurisdiction might be within that county. And the tax credits are, they're federal tax credits. There's also state tax credits. They're allocated by Utah Housing Corporation, which is a state entity. And in order to qualify and be allocated those tax credits, you have to commit to that rent restriction. But the kind of, and that's called section 42 because that's the IRS regulation that allows for those tax credits. So that's really what it is. It's section 42 tax credit, affordable housing.
So you have to rent for lower than market rate,
Correct.
but you get tax credits for doing it.
Right, that provide a good portion of the equity in the deal because, you know, you can't, it's hard to service a loan when you're renting well below market.
Thanks.
Rick, I'm sorry, it may be something completely different, but when we were talking with Nordic Valley about their workforce housing and they were discussing maybe giving credits to HUD and things like that. Something was said about the workforce housing having to be within a mile radius or some sort of distance to the actual resort that was getting the credit. But yet here we're hearing that it's open to all general public. Is that just completely different based on the resort giving credit back versus this is a separate entity? How does that?
They would still have to work through Andy Beatles and her housing division. And they would set the parameters. So what the applicant is indicating may not actually be happening with what our housing authority says. So they have to work through them.
Yeah, there's a lot of
That's why
different
I've kind of been
programs.
silent on it. So we just have to work through our housing authority in Weber County.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments?
Get some directions.
Well, you know, I think for our part, you know, we want to spend some time, we go to the community, talk with them and, you know, appear before you in a public meeting and, you know, refine, I guess, as we hear from the community, and that will allow, you know, the people that might come to the public meeting to have comment that's a little bit informed by, you know, what we're thinking and what they're seeing, as opposed to maybe, you know, what their best and worst case scenario might be. So, and, you know, I think, but, we certainly wanted to be in front of you here and the people that might be online and hearing it, we wanted to, give them some introduction to what we're thinking about.
And we do appreciate you having a public meeting outreach with the public. It's always helpful when that happens. When it doesn't always go smoothly, is true.
Thanks for the information.
Thank you.
Good luck in May.
Thank you.
I think
We need a motion to adjourn.
Pardon?
We need a motion to adjourn.
After my comment.
Okay.
I think a lot of public concern or fear is in the form-based zone. You do whatever you want. That's a public perception, and it kind of is. You get in the zone, you can do what you want. And that's where fear comes from. So I just personal suggestion, make it as specific as you can, what this thing's gonna look like. If you do something, sky's the limit,
Sure.
and we'll be really concerned about that. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
If you don't have it.
Yeah, well, that's gonna be the first time. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's technicality.
That'll get people a lot better feeling.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was the last thing. I have this little, which it's close into there, so it was,
Awesome.
that's handy little item right there.
Yeah, not bad.
I probably should have one of those. I think I do have like 2 of those at home, but not where I needed it. Thanks again. All right. Yeah, I have the bulb guys, the ones on the table, the guy from the website. Thanks for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.